So, welcome back to Tuesday's Thought, a short reflective invitation to go a little bit deeper with the themes from the latest episode of the Henny podcast. And I'm Henny, in case you hadn't already worked that one out. I am back from my dad's, where I've been for the last few days, seeing him, which was really lovely. And I haven't quite yet made it back into the stable, so I'm actually recording this from my kitchen, so it might sound a little bit different. And I just wanted to, as usual, kind of come back and share a couple of reflections that I've had since recording that last episode, where I talked about boredom is the mother of creativity. And a couple of the kind of key points that I covered on the podcast was really about the undervalued benefits of boredom. If you haven't yet managed to have a listen, then I recommend going and seeing what you think about some of the ideas that I've posited. Um, and during the episode, I shared a piece of advice that my mum once gave me, which I didn't really understand at the time, like so many bits of wisdom we get from our caregivers along the way. But she told me when our son was very young to let him be bored. And I didn't really get it. But now I think I have a much better understanding of the importance of boredom. And maybe there's something also about this is like an ongoing reflection, actually. Maybe there's something about reframing what that word actually means to us. So there might be times when we kind of feel that like, ugh, creeping, weighty sensation of boredom. Um, but it might actually be being driven by something else. So that was one of my reflections. Maybe that resonates with you too. If you think back to times when you've been bored, um, or even what the sensation of boredom feels like, uh, could it be that there are some other emotions sitting in there as well? And and I think that taps into this idea that there can be this real discomfort with boredom. Um, Maybe it's something that we resist because it feels uncomfortable, or it could even feel threatening in some way. What does that discomfort tell us about our relationship with stillness? And how might it be if we were able to step into stillness a little bit more deeply and see how that could actually serve us rather than be something that we resist? And I'm really mindful, as I say all of that, of, if you grew up in a culture where that adage that the devil makes work for idle hands was ever, repeated, if it's something that you recognize as a phrase, even if you didn't grow up in a particularly religious household, you might still be familiar with that phrase. And for some reason, I've got the film Happy Feet going through my head right now. And I think that was sort of, uh, there was almost like part of that message in Happy Feet was this idea that, if you weren't gainfully employed doing something else, then you might dance. And dancing was in some way dangerous because uh, it might lead to the breakdown of authority, which of course ultimately is what it did do, because the authority was restricting everybody within the society. If you don't know the film Happy Feet, I highly recommend going and watching it. It's a brilliant philosophical debate on culture through the eyes of penguins. Anyway, so if we had that sort of concept of the devil makes work for idle hands, even as a subliminal message, maybe carried down through our family system in subtle ways. You must keep busy. If you're not busy, you're not useful. All of those kinds of phrases. Then we might have a very complicated relationship with this idea of stillness, and therefore boredom might be something that we call the discomfort of stillness. And for me, I think anything that we can do to challenge some of these internal narratives is always going to be useful, interesting. It doesn't mean that you then spend the rest of your life lying on a sofa and going, it's fine, I'm just being bored, and that's a good thing. It's really just that noticing if you can never cope with being bored, or noticing if you can never deal comfortably with moments of stillness, then that actually might not be serving you in some ways. And one of the things that I shared on Saturday was in the episode on Saturday was how, if you're stuck at a train station, your train's delayed, it doesn't matter that for you that could be a really significant thing. It might mean you missed the flight to go on a holiday that you've been looking forward to. You can't control that situation. And so therefore, being able to be with the experience of sitting on that train station, even if it is boring, um is actually going to be far better for your whole system, rather than having stress and anxiety and frustration running through you. And so then, like, when we start to soften, we're able to um, allow maybe some more creative way of using that time there to emerge. So maybe you get out a pen and paper and write something. Maybe you journal, maybe you write a poem, maybe you plan something that you'd really love to do in the garden, like it could be anything at all. So that sense of how being willing to be bored rather than endlessly distracting ourselves can lead to creativity. That was really the crux of what I was thinking about at the weekend. And so then I think there's this sort of differential between boredom and rest. So I suppose a question really is boredom simply the absence of stimulation, but rest is an intentional pause? What happens when we allow the line between those two things to soften? Um, and I think sort of when we start thinking about that, we can see that there is an overlap there. It's just that one we call ease and comfort, and the other we call frustration and irritation. So how can we start to blend those together to better serve us, really? Um, and then I really love the kind of reflection that I was having about how, I talked in the episode about, you give a child a toy in a box and they'll end up playing with the box. Um, and, if we take this idea of childhood and boredom a little bit further, tapping into the feeling, even if we haven't got the memory, the crisp clearness of memory, how can we tap into the feeling that we had as a child on a rainy afternoon with nothing to do, and how that then morphed into um, playing games that we created, or discovering a toy that we'd completely forgotten about and having a wonderful time of imagination and play. And how can we reclaim that kind of spaciousness in our adult life? I'm really mindful of this myself, because we've got rid of our TV, because I know that that's something that I really like to use to shut down my busy brain. And what I've noticed, and full disclosure here, is that I'm watching more stuff on my laptop. So kind of not quite 100% swapped watching the TV for watching the laptop, but I recognise I could have a bit of scope creep going on here. So this is really an invitation to me, as much as anything, is, to play with being bored. So I suppose my invitation to you is to ask that question. How does it feel to play with being bored? There we go. 10 minutes, just over. All right, my darlings, I wish you an absolutely wonderful week ahead, and I send you a hug and a wave.